It started with silence. Not a press release. Not a photo op. Not a leak. Or whisper through the usual royal back channels. Just silence. And in the royal world, that's louder than any headline. 7 minutes ago, that silence broke. But not in the way anyone expected. No tearful farewell. No olive branch. No last-minute reconciliation from a father fighting for time. Just 5 chilling words, uttered behind closed doors, carried through the halls of a palace weighted by centuries of legacy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The door is now closed. Those words, spoken by King Charles III, in what sources say was a moment of clarity amid the haze of late-stage cancer treatment, weren't addressed to the nation, not even to the institution of the monarchy. They were directed, specifically, purposefully, at one person, Meghan Markle.
And the fallout, it's already started.
As we speak, insiders describe what can only be called a breakdown at Montecito. Tears, shouting, security being dismissed, even threats of walking away from upcoming media appearances. She thought she had time. She thought the door hadn't shut yet. She was wrong. But this isn't about one woman's reaction. At payas.apa, this is bigger than Meghan, bigger than Harry. This is about a monarch at the end of his reign, reshaping his legacy with one final stroke, and in doing so, cutting ties that can't be rewoven. The question now is, why? Why now? When King Charles is rumored to be slipping in and out of lucidity, when the palace is fighting tooth and nail to maintain a united front, when the public still doesn't know how much longer he truly has, and perhaps more urgently, why would he choose his final coherent act, potentially his last decisive statement as king, to issue a private message that cuts so deeply and so personally? Something doesn't add up here. Because just weeks ago, royal commentators were whispering, some even boldly declaring, that there might be a chance at healing, that Charles wanted peace in his final chapter, that he missed Harry, that there was still room at the table, however awkward the seating might be. But it seems something changed. Something inside those palace walls, something unspeakable, pushed King Charles to slam the door shut. And now, Meghan isn't just excluded from a family. She's cut off from a legacy, a kingdom, and perhaps most painfully, a dying man's final circle of trust. Which brings us to the uncomfortable truth that's been circling for months. Was this inevitable? Was the door always closing, inch by inch, while Meghan held on to hope? Or did she, unknowingly, hasten it shut with her own decisions, public remarks, and private negotiations? There are no easy answers here, but there are clues. And tonight, we'll follow them. We'll trace the threads of quiet conversations in Sandringham, of intercepted messages from Clarence House, of unconfirmed transcripts that hint at emotional collapse in Montecito. And yes, we'll confront what King Charles's message really means, not just for Meghan, but for Harry, for William, and for the future of the monarchy itself. Let's pause here, take a breath, because before we go further, it's worth remembering, this isn't a story from a decade ago. This isn't about dusty grudges or outdated headlines. This is happening now. The message came through 7 minutes ago, and the fallout is live, raw, and potentially irreversible. You can almost feel the pressure inside the palace, a mixture of duty, regret, and cold calculation. And outside, the press is circling like vultures. Social media is already boiling over. #Charles' final message is trending. Everyone's asking the same thing. What did Meghan do to deserve that? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe it's not about what she did, but about what Charles saw, what he feared, what he felt slipping away. Because there's another piece to this puzzle, and it's far darker than anyone wants to admit. Rumors have been swirling about private recordings, intercepted letters, and a whisper campaign said to be running out of Montecito in the weeks leading up to this. Was Charles tipped off? Did someone finally reveal the missing link that pushed him from quiet disapproval to firm rejection? And if so, who? There's talk unconfirmed, but persistent, that William was the final catalyst, that he personally handed Charles the information that sealed the decision. If that's true, then this wasn't just a personal decision. It was a calculated one. It was a pearl. A move made not from emotion, but strategy. A message not just to Meghan, but to history. The door is closed. 5 words. But behind them, generations of pain, political maneuvering, and perhaps the final assertion of a monarch who spent most of his life in waiting, only to be forced to act swiftly in his final days. Let me ask you this directly. If you knew your days were numbered, and you had one final chance to set things straight, not for public approval, not for popularity, but for your legacy, what would you do? Would you try to forgive? Or would you protect the future by cutting out the past? Charles has made his choice. But the real story, the one no tabloid will tell you, the one buried beneath official statements and royal protocol, is why he made it. What pushed him to that moment, and what Meghan did, or didn't do, in the final days before the silence broke. There are private emails we'll get into, unreleased footage from a royal event where Camilla reportedly whispered something that made Charles's eyes fill with tears, a courier route changed in the middle of the night, and a letter, hand-delivered to Meghan, marked with the royal cipher, containing the final words she never thought she'd read.
This isn't speculation. This is what we know.
But we don't know everything. Not yet. And that's where this story takes a turn. Because after Meghan's reaction, after the meltdown inside the Montecito estate, after the shattered glass and emergency calls, something else happened. Something no one saw coming. A second message.
It wasn't public. It wasn't addressed to Meghan.
It was sent, quietly and intentionally, to Prince William. And what Charles said in that message, that's what rewrites everything. We're not there yet. But we will be. Because to understand what that second message meant, we first have to understand the letter Meghan received, what she expected from it, and why, even after years of public tension and private betrayal, she still believed the door was open. Hope is a powerful thing. So is denial. And in the world of royalty, where image is currency and silence is strategy, believing the door is open can be the cruelest illusion of all. We'll examine the contents of that letter. We'll look at the timeline, who knew what, and when. We'll listen closely to the whispers from palace aides and the not-so-subtle shifts in royal body language that occurred in the hours before the message dropped. Because when a monarch speaks, especially one facing his final days, he speaks carefully, strategically, and with full awareness of what cannot be unsaid. Make no mistake. This is Charles's last move. And if the door is closed, that means something's been locked inside. Or someone's been locked out. And what comes next? Well, let's just say no one's walking away untouched. How do you even begin to prepare for something you never imagined would happen? What do you do when silence gives way to a message you were never meant to read? That's the place Meghan Markle found herself. Frozen, they say, in the center of her Montecito living room, holding a letter in her hands that didn't come from a PR team or legal intermediary. It didn't arrive through aides, not even with the layers of diplomatic shielding usually involved when royals communicate. It was personal, hand-delivered, marked with the royal cipher. And most importantly, it bypassed every filter Meghan had spent years constructing around herself. That, right there, was the first sign that something was different. Let's go back 72 hours. Not a week, not months, just 3 days. Because it didn't start with the letter, it started with a shift. A subtle but jarring deviation from the normal rhythm of how information moves between palaces and private estates. According to sources close to Windsor, a request had been made to reroute a royal courier. That's not unheard of. In fact, it happens fairly often, especially when security concerns arise. But this one was specific, intentional. The courier was scheduled to deliver correspondence from Clarence House to Sandringham. Last minute, the instructions changed. Montecito. No public record. No written itinerary. No explanation. The order came directly from inside Clarence House, rumored, though not confirmed, to be Charles himself. Let that sit with you. A dying monarch, barely holding on to strength, takes the time to send a personal message to the very woman the world assumed he had written off long ago.
Why? Why now?
And why in this way? The courier arrived quietly at the Montecito gate just after dusk. No press, no security alarm, no pre-warning from staff. Just a royal vehicle pulling up and asking for someone by name. Not Meghan, but the estate manager. A small envelope, discreet and sealed with wax. No address on the front. Just the initials, MM. Somewhere inside that house, Meghan was getting ready for a scheduled Zoom appearance. A light touch of makeup. Hair half up. Outfit perfectly curated for a cause-driven conversation about modern motherhood. She never made the call. Because moments after the envelope was placed in her hand, everything changed. Staffers report the shift was instant. First, confusion. Then stillness. Then an icy kind of panic that spread, silently, room to room. She didn't open it right away. According to someone close to her household, who requested anonymity for obvious reasons, Meghan stood with the letter clutched between both hands for at least 10 minutes. No words, no expression, just the weight of it. And maybe it wasn't the contents she feared, but the intent. Because here's the thing about final messages. They always arrive when you least expect them, but precisely when they're meant to. There's something haunting in that. And when she finally did break the seal, well, that's when things spiraled. No one's seen the full letter, of course. Not publicly. Not yet. But fragments have made their way out, through whispers, off-the-record confirmations, and one particularly bold leak from a source connected to a retired royal staffer. The tone of the letter was formal, but not cold. Measured. Final. A few lines stood out in particular, and I want to share these carefully, because while we can't verify the full document, multiple insiders have confirmed the phrasing is consistent with Charles's personal writing style. Precise, diplomatic, but often laced with understated emotion. One line reportedly read, "There are wounds time cannot stitch," and then this, "For the stability of the crown and the preservation of peace within its circle, I must ask you not to seek further correspondence." But it's the final line that has frozen the royal press corps in disbelief. The door is now closed. 5 words. That's all. No explanation. No apology. No bridge left intact. And for Meghan, who, by all accounts, believed reconciliation was still possible, that sentence was more than a dismissal. It was an execution of hope, of return, of legacy. Now, before we go further, let's pause. Because it's easy, dangerously easy, to assign blame here, to point fingers, to dissect public behavior, to rehash headlines from 2020 or 2022. But what makes this moment different isn't the drama, it's the timing. Charles didn't send this letter at the height of conflict. He sent it now, at the edge of mortality, which means something shifted. What did he learn? Or perhaps more pointedly, what was he finally willing to admit to himself? Was it regret? Or was it clarity? Let's consider what this message wasn't. It wasn't performative. It wasn't coordinated with palace media. In fact, several aides were reportedly blindsided when word of the letter surfaced, proving this wasn't a committee decision. It was personal, deliberate, possibly written in Charles's own hand. Which brings us to another disturbing question. Was this Charles's way of preparing for the end? Think about it. If you knew your time was short, wouldn't you want to resolve unfinished business? Or cut it away? And here's where things get murkier. Because according to insiders, Meghan wasn't the only recipient of royal correspondence that day. Another envelope, similar seal, different initials, was delivered to Prince William's residence hours later. 2 letters, sent almost simultaneously. One, a closure. One, a continuation. Not just emotional finality, but a structural rebalancing of the royal order. As if Charles, knowing the hourglass was running out, wanted to correct what he saw as a fracture in the foundation. And Meghan?
She was a piece no longer fitting.
Now, let's zoom in on the moment right after the letter was read. Witnesses say the mood inside the Montecito home turned dark. Visibly, audibly, aides dismissed early. Scheduled calls canceled. Personal assistant reportedly in tears after being shouted at in the hallway. Meghan, usually composed in moments of chaos, was reportedly inconsolable. The word used was unraveling, and somewhere in that chaos, amid shattered expectations and raw disbelief, she made a call. Not to the press, not to Harry Goblin. To the palace,